Hello YouTubers, and welcome to another episode of The Golf Nerd. After selling my Garmin R10, I knew I wanted another launch monitor, and eventually a home simulator setup. I learned from my experience with the R10 that I wanted something more accurate. I ended up with the Mevo Plus with the add-on Pro package. Stick around to hear my review of the Mevo Plus, but first please consider subscribing to the channel. I'm completely focused on bringing content that golfers want, and you're not going to want to miss the content I bring. Now before I begin the review, I have created chapters so you can skip to the parts of the review that you find the most interesting. Before buying the Mevo Plus, I was really leaning towards buying a camera-based system like the Foresight or Bushnell offerings. I was most interested in the upcoming Uneekor Eye Mini, but then I stumbled across a sale that Flightscope was running on the Mevo Plus. During the 2022 Open, I still call it the British Open, but I digress. Flightscope discounted the Mevo Plus by 10%, and they discounted the Pro package by 20% if you bought from them directly. This was enough to get me to at least consider the Mevo Plus. I watched several comparisons on YouTube that I found quite compelling, and if you're watching this and considering the Mevo Plus, I would recommend you watch these videos as well because I think they did a really good job of comparing the Mevo Plus to other offerings. I'll link to these videos in the description. So after seeing these very well done videos, I considered the economics of my decision. Quite simply, the Mevo Plus when on sale was all in for $2,600, including the Pro package. That's a minimum of $1,400 less expensive than the most affordable camera-based unit, the Bushnell Launch Pro. But this doesn't begin to take into account that the Bushnell requires a subscription to access the data that I really wanted, namely club path and face-to-path. In order to get this data, you need to sign up for an annual subscription, and that cost is a minimum of $400 a year. Yikes! I knew I wanted to access GS Pro, and I didn't want to add any additional annual costs if I didn't need to. So I was pretty confident that the Mevo performed well against other respected products. After I considered the economics of it, I decided I had to try the Mevo Plus with Pro package. So I received my Mevo Plus within a week of ordering. I followed Flightscope's recommended setup exactly. I have precisely 8 feet from Mevo to ball and 8 feet from ball to the net. I don't have anything within the working range of the Mevo that could possibly cause interference, such as metal objects or devices that send out their own signals, like another launch monitor. I'm only using LED lights as I've learned that fluorescence can cause interference as well. I set my Mevo directly on the concrete floor of my basement lab. I then entered the offset into the Mevo for the height of the ball as it's sitting on my hitting mat. I aligned the Mevo first to the hitting mat, making sure it was square. I then used a laser and aligned the center line of the Mevo to the center of my hitting strip. During this phase, I also positioned my birdie ball putting surface next to the hitting mat for use when I was playing sim golf, as I had learned a smooth putting surface was critical for the Mevo Plus. See my other video on improving Mevo Plus putting for more information. Once all this was done, the final step in the Flightscope golf app was to use the built-in camera and align the Mevo to exactly where I intended to tee a ball. The very last step I performed was to use painter's tape and outline the Mevo so if it got bumped or I needed to move it, I could easily place it back in the same position. I started hitting some irons and I was immediately impressed as the distances seemed spot on, the ball flight mirrored what I saw on the course, and the data from the shot was available very quickly, basically instantaneous. I then pulled the big stick. Now, I've been working on my driver swing for a while, and I would consider it by far the weakest part of my game. Saying that, I was extremely eager to start diagnosing my swing with data and quit all the guesswork. You see, I'm self-taught, and I've studied the golf swing extensively, but without good data, you're really just guessing when trying to make improvements. Once again, the ball flight was exactly what I had seen on the course with my very typical misses. What was super interesting, though, was for the first time I had data telling me why my misses behaved the way they did. Armed with a new powerful tool, I went about working on my swing for about 2 to 3 weeks. It was at this point I made a significant breakthrough in my driver technique. This resulted in improved quality of my driver shots. I saw the difference on the simulated course immediately. It took a few more rounds in the real world for me to start trusting myself though. As a result of this work and the insights provided by the Mevo Plus, I'm now hitting around 50% fairways and much longer than I was on average previously. It was this result that convinced me that the Mevo was accurate enough to help me improve my game. Armed with more confidence in the results the Mevo was showing me, I asked my wife if she'd like to work with me in the basement lab to help her out of her golfing rut. She's a high handicap who has historically hit driver well, but struggled off the turf. Her swing has traditionally been over the top. This has resulted in fades with her driver and dead pulls with her irons. However, she had gotten into a bad habit of thinning everything off the turf. She agreed to work on her swing, and we had the equivalent of a 30-minute lesson on the Mevo. The Mevo showed she was 4 degrees out to in and had a low point about 8 inches in front of the ball. Basically, she was so steep to the ball, to stop from chunking, she would fold her left arm and not let it extend through the shot. So we worked on her path, which in turn shallowed her out. I explained to her that she wanted her low point to be much closer to 1 or 2 inches in front of the ball, and that we wanted her path to get closer to 0. We then made the necessary technical changes to her swing, and I had her monitor the results from the Mevo. As all people developing a new skill, she struggled a bit and got frustrated, but we saw improvement in the numbers. Here we are several weeks later, and she's hitting her irons better than ever. In fact, the improvement carried over to her driver, and now she's hitting some tight little draws. This is another strong testament that the Mevo is giving data good enough to guide swing changes. So the Mevo Plus is good for technique and skills development, but how does it perform as a launch monitor for playing simulated golf? Well, like the Garmin R10, the Mevo does include a subscription to E6 Connect on iPhone and iPad. I knew ultimately I wanted to purchase GS Pro, but for a few weeks while I pursued that direction, I used the included E6 software. As before, I'm just mirroring my iPhone to a 50-inch TV as my means for playing sim golf, and I did the same with the Mevo. This is a budget-friendly sim setup, and one that I still think provides a lot of fun. With E6, the Mevo worked great. I really love the golf course sanctuary, and it is included with the E6 license bundled with the Mevo, and I played it several times. Obviously with the Mevo Plus I can now putt on the sim course, which I couldn't do with the Garmin, and I have to say putting on a sim really adds more depth and dimension to a sim round. I wouldn't have thought it would be as impactful as I found it to be, but I was wrong. Golf without putting is just not as engaging. I finally built my PC and moved over to GS Pro. This software is amazing, and I really enjoy several aspects of it that are unique to GS Pro. If you'd like me to perform a review on GS Pro, comment below and I will. Suffice it to say, the Mevo integrated flawlessly with the GS Pro. I have had just a couple of minor issues, but overall the experience has been terrific. As a result, I am finalizing my design for a true DIY simulator that will be featured in the coming months on the channel. I'm really excited about this next phase in my humble golf lab. So the Mevo Plus has worked beyond my expectation for swing development, and the sim functionality has been really enjoyable. But there are a few complaints I have about the Mevo Plus. Namely, it takes a while to start up, meaning when you push power it takes what feels like a long time to finish booting up, and then you have to connect through Wi-Fi, which takes a bit. This also introduces some concerns for quite a few people who use Wi-Fi to connect to the internet too. Meaning, in order to play your sim software of choice, you need to be connected to the internet, but you also have to connect to the Mevo Plus through Wi-Fi. This means many users are having to buy an additional USB Wi-Fi dongle for a second Wi-Fi connection to the Mevo. This allows them to connect to the internet and the Mevo simultaneously. I ran a dedicated Ethernet cable to my gaming PC and didn't have this issue, but many do, and sometimes it gets a little tricky as reported by end users. I definitely recommend a dedicated Ethernet cable if possible. And with some of the cool mesh Wi-Fi units available today, it really wouldn't be that hard or expensive. Anyway, the only other gripe I have is that it would be great if Flightscope would release a version of their Flightscope app on PC. The mobile app works fine, but I really like their driving range and associated data format for training, but I hate that I'm constrained to using my phone to access it. I'd much rather just continue to use my PC in this dedicated capacity, and not have to mess around with my iPhone at all. Now, having considered all the pros and cons, including the successes I've already seen in swing development, and the cost savings over the GC3, I wholeheartedly recommend the Mevo Plus, and especially recommend the Pro package for those who know how to use the data to its fullest extent. Now, there are some provisions to this recommendation. Primarily, I have heard enough dissatisfied customers on the internet say the Mevo isn't accurate, and I can only presume that their setup didn't allow for the Mevo to work to its fullest extent. This could be an environmental issue, or it could be a lack of attention to detail to the actual setup as recommended by Flightscope. I honestly can't say since I'm not seeing the same thing, but I would be remiss not to mention it. So if you have the space required and are detail-oriented in your setup of the device, I think it can work terrifically for the full swing. Now, having said that, I don't think the putting, chipping, and pitch shots are as accurate as, say, a GC3, but that, in my opinion, is the trade-off. If you really want to hone your short game in your hitting bay, then the extra cost of a GC3 or other camera-based unit may justify the price tag. Ultimately, I'm a field player, and I just can't say with any degree of certainty that the Mevo is great at short game. One additional caveat, although I don't think the Mevo is great at reading putting speed, I will say that using the Mevo on GS Pro has improved my ability to hit my putting line on the course. This may sound counterintuitive, but the fact is playing golf on GS Pro has improved my putting stroke, and the result is showing up on the course. I suspect it is because of all the straight lines when going from my hitting mat to my putting mat, and this has helped me with alignment and putter swing path, but that's a guess. Regardless of why, my putting is noticeably better, and I think that's noteworthy. I have learned a new method of measuring my putting surface speed, and this has proven to further enhance the Mevo putting accuracy, so the verdict at this point, it's still out. So with all the provisions out of the way, I would rate the Mevo Plus a solid B+ on its merits. However, for its price, especially when you can pick it up on sale like I did, I'd rate it a solid A and would lean towards an A+. But again, it's worth stating that my environment seems to be perfect for the Mevo Plus and your situation may be different. As always, if you got value out of this video, please consider hitting the like button. Also, I'd really like for you to join my community and subscribe to the channel. Well, that's it for the Golf Nerd. Hit 'em long and straight, and I'll see you next time.